Welcome today, everyone. My name is Jai Chigani. I'm the project lead for the Ships to Shore Sailing Access Fund. And today, as you know, this is a part of our boot camp series. So everyone from the Access Fund, thanks for coming today. It's great to finally get to be face-to-face, at least my face you can see. So yeah, today we're going to be having the Tales from the Crew event. And I'll just go over some quick things first, if I can get my screen back. Here it is. Okay. Yeah, so the first thing today, we're going to do a quick land acknowledgement. So while we meet today on a virtual platform, we begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all lands that we are on today. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility to improving relationships between nations and improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. So Ships to Shores aims to encourage contemplation about the current relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities, as First Peoples, as Canadians, as members of coastal communities, and as people in the marine sector. So Project Ships to Shores, here's a quick overview of what we are. I'll go over quickly. We're a pan-Canadian project created by the Broadreach Foundation with support from the Government of Canada. And yeah, we partner with a lot of different other community organizations. And as you Sailing Access Fund people will know, we're partnering with a bunch of sail training organizations to provide bursaries for tall ship sailing this summer, which is, yeah. And yeah, we aim to, here's some of our goals. We just aim to engage 2,000 youth across Canada in these types of activities. Since we're in, an online world nowadays, this is the way we're accomplishing these goals. Yeah, so, oh, that's the wrong, this is the one. This is, so now we'll get into the Tales from the Crew event, and I'll hand it over to Daniel. But yeah, welcome, and I hope you guys enjoy.
Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. We're all very pleased to see you here. We'll begin by passing it on to our panelists for a brief introduction.
Hi, my name is Leticia Taylor. I'm from Salt Spring Island, British Columbia. I am currently in Nova Scotia, just arrived yesterday, and going to be working as a deckhand on the Blue Nose 2 this season.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tasha. I live in Toronto, Ontario. Right now, I am the Programs and Projects Managers for the Broadreach Foundation. Previously have been the Program Manager for Toronto Brigantine.
Hello, everyone. My name is Liam. I'm from Toronto as well, and I work as captain and mate on the Kiama, which is a boat run by the Great Lakes Schooner Company in Toronto.
Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel, and I'm from Ottawa. I'm a part of Bytown Brigantine, where I've been crew both on board the Fair Jean and the Black Jack. We're now going to begin with our questions for our panelists. So our first question today is, what are some milestones from your first sailing trip?
All right, so first sailing trip was really exciting and really scary. I'd never done anything like that before. I was sailing on the Pacific Grace with the Sail and Life Training Society in Victoria, and yeah, it was 44 people on board, so that was just crazy. So that was huge, living in a small space with 44 people that I didn't know from around the world. We had a couple people from Germany and a person from France at the time too. So that was really terrifying. So worth it. Also, climbing a loft, so afraid of heights, but going up there, just the views are gorgeous, and once you're up there, you feel pretty safe, and it's pretty sturdy.
My first sailing experience was quite a while ago. It was in 2007. I sailed on the Playfair from Toronto to Parry Sound. It was the only time I'd ever been on a boat for longer than like 10 minutes. So it was pretty scary, just being in that sort of space where like not only are you traveling on a boat from one place to another on a strange boat with strange people that you don't know, but you're also sleeping in close quarters with these people. So it was definitely a culture shock for me, but it was definitely worth it in the end. It was fun. I made it, obviously, to Parry Sound, and I ended up really liking it. So it was a good experience in the end.
And my first sailing experience was actually when I was about 8 or 9 years old. I was actually a guest on a day sail on the St. Lawrence II out of Kingston. I wasn't quite big enough or brave enough to go all the way aloft, but I do remember it was a big deal for me going out into the man catcher on the bowsprit.
My first sailing adventure was on the Ottawa River on board the Blackjack. And I think for me, one of my favorite memories was actually learning to use a compass. Before, I've always seen it on TV and in the movies, but I've never gotten to experience doing it myself. So getting to learn basic navigation as well as helming the ship, which is, I guess, driving the ship, was a pretty cool experience. Now, our next question for the panelists is, how and why did you get into sailing?
So actually 10 years ago today, my Nana signed me up for my first voyage on S.A.L.T.S. It was a birthday present and I had to pay half of it. And I was like, are you kidding me? You want me to pay $1,000 to go sailing on a tall ship with people I don't know and miss Canada Day with my friends? So I was not impressed, to be honest. I was like, what the heck is this? But then I got on it, and that 10 days on board the Pacific Grace was the best gift I could have ever received. After that, started doing 3 voyages per summer on S.A.L.T.S. and have now traveled a good chunk of the world on the tall ships. So it was awesome.
I didn't really get into sailing because I didn't really know what it was. I was hoodwinked into thinking that I was going on a cruise. And so when I showed up and I saw a small boat with kind of tired and dirty teenagers, I did not know what to expect. But by the time I turned around to try to ask the people who brought me there to take me home, they had already left. So I kind of was I just wanted to go with the flow. And I ended up really liking it. I'm glad that I didn't try to leave and go home because I ended up really liking it in the end. But I wouldn't really say that I got into sailing. It was just kind of something I happened upon. I'd been camping for most of my adolescence. And so it was just something that I ended up doing that was new, and I ended up liking it, surprisingly. So.
And for me, it was the same ship I was on as a really young kid that, as a teenager, you sort of forget about it. But one summer, my dad said, hey, remember that one boat you went on as a kid? You can go on it again and actually stay there for like a whole week. So I thought that was a great idea, and I never stopped doing that. And here I am like 10, 12 years later, and I'm still sailing on boats like this. So it's been pretty wicked.
I guess for me, the way I got into sailing was actually through a summer camp. I was at an overnight summer camp that was on the Ottawa River, and the Blackjack would always sail by every week, and we would always see this big, tall-looking pirate ship sail by our camp. And after that, I told my mom when I got home that I want to sail on board a pirate ship, and she looked into it, and we found Bytown Brigantine in Ottawa, and that's how my sailing journey began. Now, I guess our next question for our panelists is, how are some of the skills that you've learned on board tall ships applicable to your everyday lives?
Yeah, so there's obviously like the hands-on skills for sailing on the tall ships. Like you'll learn rope work, your knots, stuff like that. And that maybe outside of sailing I don't use too much. But some of the skills that I've learned and have been really important in my everyday life is communication, talking with people, sorting out problems. Living in a space with 40 to 80 people is really difficult. You all have your good days, you have really bad days, and you support each other. You are there to be the support for one another. So learning how to communicate, how to empathize, how to make the team work. If someone needs a minute to step out and have a cry, that's okay. You need to step it up and make sure that you keep everything happening and making it go on safe. Also work ethic. making the boat run is really, really hard. It takes a lot of people. So that has definitely helped me every day since then, working in my jobs. Just keeping going and working hard and doing the best I can do to make whatever I'm doing happen.
I think you made a lot of really great points there. I think also something to think about is resiliency, like learning how to be in a difficult situation. And it can be hard sometimes to kind of push through, but sometimes you need to. And, you know, obviously there's always time to step aside and take the time that you need to, you know, come to terms with what's going on. Maybe you're scared, maybe you're upset. Maybe you're just not having a good day, or maybe something happened before you went on the boat that's just kind of been sticking with you. But learning to kind of work through that in a way that's healthy, and also that doesn't affect the rest of your crew. And I think additionally, something to think about is also confidence. I think when you're a teenager, or at least this was my experience, you have a lot of people around you that are telling you what to do, like go to school, go to work, you know, do your homework, do these things. When you're on a boat, it's different because you have adults around you that, yes, they're telling you what to do, but they're also giving you the space to problem solve and do things for yourself and see that your actions have an impact on what happens on the boat from day to day. So the things that you do at 4 o'clock in the afternoon are going to affect what happens at 8 o'clock when your watch changes. So it's a really interesting experience to kind of see your actions make a difference and make an impact on the people around you. And I think that was a big takeaway for me from sail training.
Yeah, and to add upon that, like sailing teaches you responsibility and, you know, stick-to-itiveness, because when you're on a ship and you have a problem, you can't just walk away from the ship. You know, you're all in it together, and if you don't figure it out, things are going to get sideways very quickly. And, you know, another thing with working on a ship 24/7 is that you have to solve the problem because someone else is asleep. You know, it's your job, it's your watch, and that sort of teaches you a lot about you know, self-care and just taking pride in where you work and where you live, because on a boat it's the same thing.
And I guess also when it comes to skills that you've learned on board tall ships that apply to everyday lives, you learn a lot about yourself being on a tall ship. You learn about how resilient you can be. For me, I was kind of like Leticia. I never really liked heights, and climbing aloft was a really scary experience. Even to this day, I don't like climbing aloft, but pushing yourself to try new things really does build confidence, it builds skills, and most of all, it shows you that you can accomplish something if you put your mind to it. On board a tall ship, you'll be put out of your comfort zone on a daily. It's something that you don't really experience in your everyday lives, but by doing it, you learn how to adapt. You learn how to think critically, and you also learn that you have an entire crew of supportive teammates there to help you out. And I think that's something that's really, really important. Now, our next question is, what are some of the hardships about living on a tall ship or about tall ship sailing, and how can you overcome them?
So I'm gonna go to Class Afloat. When I was working on board as a cook's mate, that was a really, really tough year for a lot of us. A lot of the crew and students, they didn't realize that, like, this is a 24-hour job, even as a student or as a crew. You're on call 24 hours a day. If they need all hands, you go all hands. If there's people that are deathly seasick, you go and you help them out and you help the people on deck that need it. So I think one of the hardest things was being a constant support for 80 people, for the professional crew and the students. Professional crew have hard jobs. You're responsible for all these lives and you're trying to teach as many things as possible. And it's really exciting, but it's also so difficult. And there's definitely good days and there's bad days too. So being able to support each other and empathize and help. Yeah, I think that's about it.
When I think about hardships on board, I think back to my trainee summer. And I don't know about the other panelists, but as a teenager, I was a very angry person. And I kind of had a bit of a short temper. And so a hardship for me was learning to listen to people around me, even when I didn't like what they were saying and when I didn't like what I didn't want to hear what they were saying. So for me as a trainee, it was a lot for me to develop my listening skills. And for me as a 17-year-old kid, like that's a hardship, having to, be taken out of your comfort zone of always being the loudest voice in the room to now being, okay, now I need to sit back and hear what these people are saying because I have no idea what's going on at the end of the day, even though I like to pretend that I know what's going on. I really don't have an idea of what's happening. And so learning to listen and learning to be okay with that discomfort was a hardship that I had to kind of overcome. And it's something that I still work on, learning to deal with and be okay with being outside of your comfort zone is a hardship in and of itself. And it takes a lot to overcome it. But if you just sit back and listen and take a moment to hear what other people are saying around you, developing that skill becomes easier as you go along. There we go.
I can talk more about the hardships of being a leader on board ship, being a captain, where it's really your decision, and the choices you make can sometimes be very difficult. Whether that means stopping something from growing into a personal problem between your crewmates, versus trying to avoid a storm and going into a port, or the opposite, leaving a port early to get ahead of a storm. It also could mean the sacrifice of people's sleep in order to push through something, whereas it's easy to turn back, turn your tail and run, whereas that the strength of a crew can get through something together. And being a captain, you have to decide how strong are we collectively, and are we ready for something like this, like a storm. So that sometimes can be, that can really put a hurt on how much sleep you get at night, but other times the payoff is worth it. Yeah.
Definitely. There's a lot of different hardships on board tall ship sailing, just like there is in everyday life. For me, I think one of the hardest parts was when I first began sailing as a trainee. It's just like when you start a new job, you're the new one there, you don't know what's going on, and it might be a little bit intimidating. I know it was for me, trying to learn all the new sailing terms, trying to learn all the knots, trying to learn just how to fit in with a crew, in an environment that you've never been in before. It definitely takes time, and it definitely was scary at first, especially since you're on a sailboat, you're on an environment that you've never been on before, and most of the time you're with people that you've never met before. So sometimes it is a little bit scary and it is a little bit intimidating, but I do find that once you get to know people after the first day or so, everything kind of falls into place. There seems to be a balance that occurs within the ship and the ship's company, and everyone soon finds out where they fit in, how they can help, and just that this is one big community on board and that everyone is there to support one another. I guess our next question is, what are some of the skills that you wished you learned before boarding a tall ship for the first time?
Okay, so part of sail training is the training part. So you don't need to know anything to go on board. They will teach you absolutely everything that you need to know, from knots to steering to what ropes to pull when, what the commands are, difference between port and starboard. That being said, I probably would have liked to work on my knots a little bit beforehand. I am someone who really struggles with knots still to this day. When I finish the season, the knots are out of my brain until we start again. And then I feel like I'm relearning them every time. And I usually spend a week struggling with them and then I have it back. So maybe spending a little bit more time learning some knots before, or even on the ship, taking 10 minutes aside a day to just go sit with some other crewmates and practice our knots together. And I wouldn't necessarily say this is a skill to learn beforehand, but packing lightly, I guess that could be a skill. What, like, differing what you need and like what you want to bring and what you're going to use and what's going to sit in your bag and take up space and be annoying the whole time. Yeah, follow the checklist, because you don't need more than what they're saying. They've experienced it, they know. So definitely just follow the list and bring as like the least amount of stuff possible.
Skills I wish I learned before I went SAIL training. Ooh, I know. How to deal with difficult people. Sometimes there are other trainees that are there and your personalities clash. And when I was a trainee, I didn't quite know how to work through that. I'm not saying that there were problems when I was on board, but everybody knows what happens when there's somebody in a group that is a little annoying. You maybe spend a lot of time rolling your eyes, maybe saying some, maybe some underhanded comments that aren't mean, but they're definitely not helping the situation. So I think that before I went sailing, it would have been great for me to sit down and be like, okay, there's going to be some people with differing personalities from you, and you're going to have to learn how to deal with it and be okay with, maybe this person says, make some comments that you don't agree with. Let's just let it go. Just let it go. It's okay. It's only a week. You'll get through this. Trust the adults around you to say, this person's making me feel uncomfortable, and let the, adults deal with it instead of trying to charge in headfirst like the hero of the story and figure it all out for yourself. Maybe taking a step back and maybe learning how to delegate some of these problems that you might be having. And then I think also I wish I had learned some skills for learning how to be a bit more comfortable aloft. That's something like Daniel, I still do struggle with when I go on tall ships. It's scary to go aloft and I have to psych myself up every time I do it. But I get there. But when I was a trainee, I did not make it aloft. And I think if I have to say anything to anybody, it is 100% okay if you don't make it aloft on your first day. It's nothing to be ashamed about. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. It happens to the best of everyone. Even the crew member that seems super cool and like they've all got it together, they probably were nervous their first time going aloft. And so you're not the only one. So there we go.
Yeah, what else to add to that? I would even just say, I don't think it's something you even can learn, but how to deal with sleep loss is one thing. Or just like a change in your circadian rhythm, even just after one day, working on the sort of dog watch system that some ships use. That can be really tough after a week, and you just come home and you're totally wiped out for, a whole day. Or that, even when you do sleep on board a ship, sometimes it's cramped quarters. So unless you're used to, camping, sleeping in a sleeping bag, something like that, like it's a little jarring the first time because everybody's crowded in and, it's dark and sometimes wet and, that can be tough to actually get sleep. So
I guess from a sailing standpoint, something that I always found difficult even to this day are sailing terms. On a sailboat, there's a lot of different terms that mean a lot of different things. For example, the head is equivalent to the bathroom. The galley is equivalent to the kitchen. So there's a lot of terms that I wish I did know ahead of time. So my tip to anyone would be go on Google, search up basic sailing terms, and just familiarize yourself with some of the most basic ones, such as port, starboard, galley, head, just so when you first go on board, it might be a little bit easier to remember where certain things are. And yeah, I think that's something that is always good to learn. Our next question for our panelists is, what is it like being crew on board a tall ship? And what does a general day look like?
All right. In my experience, every tall ship does things similarly, but also different. So for my experiences breakfast usually starts at about 7 o'clock in the morning. And then you have colors or morning assembly. You'll raise the flag, you'll get whatever announcements there are for the day, and then jobs for the day for cleaning stations. So after that, we usually split out into cleaning. There'll usually be a deck wash team, someone cleaning the galley, sweeping the hold, the forecastle, cleaning the aft cabin, just taking care of the whole ship, making sure it's all clean and nice. You take care of the ship, it takes care of you. And then after that, you kind of split into your watches. So we usually do 4 hours on, 8 hours off, and that, depending where you are, what organization you're with, can change every day, or it will change every 3 weeks or every 6 weeks, depending on the organization. And then, yeah, usually lunch at about 11, 12. Change over for watches. And then during the day, there's usually some activities. You can hang out in the bow, play guitar, draw, go aloft, go on the bowsprit. A lot of downtime for just hanging out, making good connections with new people and making friends. Then dinner, and then on S.A.L.T.S, we do mug up. That usually starts with an hour of games by the third officer. She leads that, or he leads that. And then we go down below and we sing songs, play music, and the cook usually makes really delicious treats and snacks. After that, you have about an hour to just kind of hang out and chill, and then it's lights out at about 9 o'clock.
It was a little different with Briggs. So your watch system is established on the first day of the course. So the crew members, the permanent crew members, are sorted into their watches depending on the rank that they hold. So your junior officer would be the blue watch officer. So it's blue, white, and red are the watches. Your intermediate watch officer, or your second most senior watch officer or a permanent crew member, would be your white watch officer. And then your most senior crew member would be your red watch officer. And cleanup duties are sorted by what watch you're in. So depending on where you fall in the watch schedule for the day, also depends on what cleanups you have. So if you're coming off of watch at 8 o'clock in the morning, you would do the breakfast cleanup, and then you would get your downtime until your next watch. But the events of the day kind of depend on what we're doing, what the itinerary is for the day. If we have somewhere to be, so for example, let's say we're in Tobermory, Ontario, just off of the Georgian Bay, and we want to get to the North Channel by the end of the day. That day there might be a heavy sailing day. We might not have a lot of time to stop or do any sightseeing or anything like that. But sometimes we have kind of more of the downtime days. Maybe we've anchored somewhere overnight, or we've gone bows up. So for anyone who doesn't understand what that means, bows up is kind of when you drive your boat up as close to the land as possible, and you set an anchor behind you to kind of hold the boat in place. And then you kind of have like a closer spot to the land where you can kind of like jump off the boat and go explore. It's really fun. It's actually a really interesting process. So if you ever have a chance to go bows up on your watch or on your trainee course, that's a really cool experience to have. So maybe sometimes we might go and do a campfire, or we might go explore some of the local sites, maybe have some opportunities to take photos, maybe see some waterfalls, maybe go swimming. And then we'll have, our lunch. Usually if we go on an outing, like a hike, we'll have lunch off of the boat, come back, we'll have dinner. Usually we have something called Kai, which is very similar to Mug Up, what you were talking about, Leticia. It's like an evening snack, kind of. So either like cookies or brownies or cake or, whatever the cook is wanting to cook for the day. And then we have a sunset ceremony, which is, it's a very, very fun activity. So Playfair is a very small boat in comparison to like Pacific Swift or Pacific Grace. So you get the whole crew to kind of join up in a circle around the foremast and around the hatches to go down below. So around the forwardmost mast on the boat. And then we all join arms and we do a little sing song and dance around and, you know, bump each other's hips and stuff. It's very fun. It's like a way for us to say good evening to each other, share a little bit about how the day went, do some evening announcements about what the plan is overnight. And then we do evening assignments if we're alongside or at anchor or bows up. The captain will have some night orders. We'll split the watches up a little bit differently so people can take advantage of more sleep. If we're underway, then we just follow the regular 4-hour watch system overnight. And then the next day it starts all over again and we just keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say because I've done exactly that, you know, so many times. So what else can be said?
Yeah, we sailed on the same boats, and S.A.L.T. was Playfair's sister ship, so things are kind of run very similarly.
Yeah, and maybe Bytown has done things differently.
Yeah, what does Bytown do, Daniel?
Let's find out what's different.
So Bytown, we get half an hour more sleep. So we begin our day at 7:30. Then we have colors like Leticia and her ship, like S.A.L.T.S at 8 a.m. From there, we have 1 hour of ship's duties, whether that's cleaning or maintenance, from 8 to 9. And then we begin our day with sailing. So depending if we're traveling somewhere, we would sail, depending what the plan is. On Bytown, we also have an educational program. So sometimes we have high school courses being taught. So that's a little bit of a different system because the trainees have to both manage sail training as well as a high school course. So the way that normally works is the watches, we divide them into 2 watches, green and red. And in the morning, red watch would be on deck while green watch has their high school course below deck. And then in the afternoon after lunch, red watch would be on deck and then green watch would be down below having their high school course. In the evenings, we have something called Ship's Concert, where the watches have to put together a little skit or something funny for the crew. We've had really funny ones before, and sometimes we get the captain and the first mate to do their own thing as well. So we've had quite funny experiences there. And then depending in the evening, whether we're in port or whether we're at anchor, we would have someone on watch, or if we're sailing in the evening, we would have the watches as well on board. So pretty similar structure and really fun time. Before we move on to our questions from the audience, I think it would be good if we explain what watches are and how they're made. Because I think we've used that term quite a bit, and for new trainees, they might not know what that is. So maybe if one of the panelists would like to explain what a watch is.
I can explain. So a watch is kind of like, think of it like as your like team, like your little squad of people. So each sail training organization does things a little bit differently, as we've heard, but I'll use Playfair as an example. So let's say you all show up for your course on the very first day. What we'll do is we'll split you into a watch. So your watch is your group of people. You do the bulk of your sail training with that group of people. So your watch will be assigned a junior officer called a petty officer, and you'll have a watch officer, which is a more senior officer. So your watch officer would be more in charge of like the navigation and overseeing the education of the watch as a whole, whereas your petty officer would be the person that is kind of operates the closest with you. So they're the ones that help during cleanups. They're the ones that would do the bulk of your teaching. So they would teach you your knots. They would help you go aloft and overcome those fears of going aloft. That would be your petty officer. So they would spend the most time with you. And so essentially what would happen is each boat, their system is split. The hours are split throughout the day. So for Toronto Brigantine or Briggs Youth Sailing now, they split their watches into 4-hour watches. And then they have something that's called a dog watch, which is basically in place so that the same group of people are not standing the same watches overnight. So they're not having the same kind of it's like they're the ones that are in charge of the boat. That's essentially what your watch is. You're in charge of the boat during that time that you're on watch. So they have these 2-hour dog watches from 4 in the afternoon to 6 in the afternoon, and then from 6 in the afternoon to 8 o'clock in the evening. And that just switches things up so you don't have the same group of people being on call from 12 in the morning to 4 in the morning, because that would really suck if every night you were on watch from 12 o'clock p.m. or a.m. to 4 o'clock a.m. So that's just kind of to switch things up so that everyone's kind of moving around throughout your time there. Do you have anything to add?
I have to add on commercial vessels, so freighters, from my experience working on them, that is how they do the watches. So they have 3 officers, first, second, third, and you're assigned the same watch every 12 hours. So if you're the first officer, you're on watch from 4 o'clock in the morning until 8, and then 4 o'clock in the afternoon till 8, and so on for the rest of the officers.
And during that time, while you're on call, so I'll use the word on call instead of on watch because that's kind of a more universal term. So when you're on call, you help to set the sails if any sails need to be set. If we need to move the boat in any way or maneuver, so either we're tacking, which is putting the front of the boat through the eye of the wind, or jibing, which is putting the back of the boat through the eye of the wind, your team is responsible for making sure that everything that needs to happen in order to make that maneuver successful happens. So your watch officer is driving the boat, or your team leader is driving the boat. Your petty officer is setting stations so all of the trainees know where they need to go and what lines they need to pull and what the calls are during that time. And then when you're off, when you're not on call anymore, you get to do relax, or maybe you're doing some cleaning, or you're reading, or you're playing the guitar, or you're sitting at the front of the boat and just enjoying the scenery.
Thank you. So now some questions from
Daniel. Can I just say one thing? Just because I'm not a panelist, guys, but I just wanted to chime in because I've been on a S.A.L.T.S trip before. Watch is probably the most fun part because you're either, you like Tasha said, you're on bow watch. You're like just looking to make sure that you're not hitting any logs or anything. And sometimes if you're, in like the remote areas of BC, you'll get to see dolphins, and then you'll be the first one on bow watch. So you'll be the first one to see them, and everyone will jump out. your responsibility is to say, dolphins or something like that to everyone else in the back and make sure they come out and see them. And also night watch. That was the most fun part of my trip because I actually volunteered for night watch, like I think almost every night. Because you get to see the stars and everything, and I'm sure that's across all of our sail training organizations. It's probably like the coolest experience, and especially if you're sailing at night, that's also really cool. And don't be scared. You just have to be strapped into the boat. So there's a big line that goes, so you won't fall over. But even if you do fall over, someone will see you. It's the watches group a responsibility to make sure they see people who fall over as well. But such a fun experience. And I'll throw it back to you, Daniel, to talk about the audience questions.
Thank you, Jay. I must agree. The stars is probably, like looking at the stars is probably one of the most spectacular parts of tall ship sailing, especially on night watch. So I'll pass, our question for our panelists is, what is your favorite dinghy to, I guess, sail?
I've never sailed a dinghy. So that's me admitting that I've never done dinghy sailing before. So unfortunately, I don't have much expertise there.
Yeah, the only, I guess, the smallest boat I've ever sailed, I don't know if it would classify as a dinghy, but maybe it's just a 420, almost like a laser. I don't know if they're the same thing, but yeah, small boats are cool.
Small boats are cool.
They're fun because you can sail them by yourself or just with one other person. So
they're also very scary because you're very close to the water when you like heel over. So
yes,
but very fun.
Yeah, fun.
I've only ever sailed in like a little dory that we just took a sheet and a big stick, and that was it, and that was pretty awesome.
Our next question is, what is the best job on board for you?
I liked being the cook. That's because I got the most sleep. So and I got to eat the food and the food that I made, and I was quite a big fan of my own cooking. So I loved cooking.
I quite enjoy helming, just steering the ship. You can put me there all day. I'll do it.
I really love being like bosun's mate, or I was in Picton Castle Bosun School, so learning all the hands-on stuff and getting the ship looking really pretty and fixing everything up, that easily my favorite.
Now, our next question is, what is the difference between serving aboard a tall ship and being a sea cadet and sailing with sea cadets? So is there a difference between tall ship sailing and sea cadets?
The Toronto Brigantine program was very loosely based off of Sea Cadet programming. So there's a lot of similarities between how the McLaughlin Brigantine, so Playfair, and St. Lawrence too. There's a lot of similarities between how they run their programming and Sea Cadets. The only difference is that you don't have to wear a uniform. Like, I know that Sea Cadets, when they're sailing, they have a uniform that they have to wear at all times. It's a little bit more casual and laid back on tall ships. From my experience, there is some regimented areas of programming, like, there's the watch system that we've talked about at length, and there's certain ways that things are done on board that are very structured, but it is a little bit more laid back than Sea Cadets. But if you are a Sea Cadet, you will find quite a few similarities between your programming and tall ship programming.
I guess our next question is, how old do you have to be to sail on a tall ship?
I think that varies per organization. S.A.L.T.S, for example, they sail with people 13 to 25 years old. Picton Castle, for longer voyages, you have to be 18 plus, but if it's smaller voyages, they'll take people that are 16. And I believe Class Afloat is 15, 16 to 21.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, each program is different, but according to Transport Canada, you have to be at least 12 years old to be a trainee on board a sail training ship.
Or I think the wording is at least turning
12 the year that you go sailing.
Yeah.
Perfect. Now, here's an interesting one. Have any of the tall ship sailors responded to a Mayday/emergency call on the water?
Yes. My experience was I was on Pathfinder. I forget the year, but it was either 2006 or 2007. And it was the incident in which Fairjean had to, I don't know if it was Mayday, but it was a pan call. We saw the, Hercules ships going out to find them. We didn't get to them because we weren't very fast, but we were responding and on the way out to where they were. There were no fatalities, I think just a minor injury, but
yeah.
And I think
that was 2007.
Yeah, 2007.
I guess for us, this was also on Fairjean. It was in 2017 for the 150th regatta of all the tall ships. It was, I believe, we were on our way to Montreal. We just left Toronto, and this was on night watch. The Canadian Navy was doing, I guess they were practicing some emergency drills, and they set off flares, but they didn't tell anyone. So we saw some flares go off on our night watch, and obviously we went to go respond, but turned out 1 or 2 hours later, we found out that it was just a drill from the Navy. So that was quite the experience.
Yeah, was that Lake Ontario?
I think so. That was on Lake Ontario. I think so.
Yeah.
Way to go, Navy.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So what happened there was the CFB Trenton does a lot of stuff. So in the Prince Edward County, there's always stuff like that happening.
Let's see. Next question is, where are all the places that you've traveled to? It's an interesting one.
Shouldn't we go in order?
Yeah, I guess we can go in order. I think everyone's traveled places.
Okay. I started sailing on S.A.L.T.S, so that was the west coast of British Columbia, and I've gone up, starting in Victoria, up the Inside Passage of BC, sailed up to Alaska, around Haida Gwaii, and back down the west coast of Vancouver Island. I went on Lord Nelson with Jubilee Sailing Trust, and that voyage was a 14-day trip from Gibraltar. We went, which is like the bottom of Spain, but English territory. We went from Gibraltar to Madeira, and Madeira to Las Palmas, Gran Canaria. Then on Class Afloat, that starts in Amsterdam. We sailed down the west coast of Europe and dipped into the Mediterranean, came back out, stopped in Morocco, Madeira, went down to Senegal, crossed the equator into Fernando de Noronha, a little Brazilian island in the middle of the Atlantic. Really beautiful. If you get the chance to go, you should. Then we finished crossing the Atlantic and went to Suriname. We spent a week in the Amazon River. And then I finished the semester in Barbados.
My story is not nearly as exciting. My first training course, I went from Toronto to Parry Sound. And then throughout my time in Briggs, I sailed throughout the Great Lakes. The furthest that I've gone from Toronto on a boat is I went to Chicago in 2010 for Tulsa Festival, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, so similar experience. I've been on every Great Lake as far northwest as Thunder Bay and I guess even Superior, Wisconsin, and been all the way south to Chicago and Indiana, and all the way out down the Seaway. I've been all along the north shore of Quebec and down to the Maritimes, around Nova Scotia, Halifax, and Bay of Fundy, St. John, all the way to New York City, and up the Hudson River back to Lake Ontario.
For me, I've only sailed within Ontario and Quebec. The farthest I've sailed to was Quebec City, so up the St. Lawrence Seaway from Toronto. I guess our next question is, have any of you guys ever fallen overboard?
Not by accident. We were doing a man overboard drill on S.A.L.T.S and got to put on one of the immersion suits, the big orange, like ginormous orange suits that you'll get to try on when you're sailing. So we took a line and swang into the ocean to see if anyone would notice, and just put like normal clothes on top. Some people did not notice, some people did, but that was pretty awesome.
One time I was a sea anchor. So a sea anchor is something that you drag behind your boat to slow yourself down. We were traveling on the STV Pathfinder through Bay Fin, which is just up in the northern part of the Georgian Bay. It's like this really pretty little channel. And we were going through there and we were going too fast. And the captain said, you know, we need a sea anchor. And I bravely volunteered myself to jump off the back of the boat and just be dragged by a line with like one of those donuts, like floatable, inflatable tube things. I was a really terrible sea anchor. There's no photographic evidence of it. So, but it was a lot of fun. I got to just like hang out behind the boat while everyone else was working, and I was just chilling in this like inner tube being dragged behind the boat. So it was good.
Yeah, other than doing it on purpose for those fun reasons, the only time I've unintentionally gone in the water was sailing a very small boat, like a dinghy, where we capsized, and it was just sort of, all of a sudden you're sailing, and then you blink and you're in the water, which is funny, and just it's such a small boat, you just flip it back and get in and keep going. So it wasn't as shocking or awful as I thought it was going to be.
Another question is, what was your most memorable day aboard?
Who wants to go first?
Tough question.
Well, it's, we can continue the order.
Okay, I have 3 that are like probably tied for first. My first one would be in Alaska. We were at Tracy's Arm, which was one of the big glaciers there, and myself and 2 other people, we got offered to swim. Nobody wanted to swim except for myself and 2 other people. So we jumped in, went and grabbed some like loose bits of iceberg so we could make shaved ice, and then came back on board. It was really awesome, but it was pouring rain for the entire 12 days, so did not get warm for the next 12 days. Next would be seeing the northern lights up in Haida Gwaii while on night watch. That I'd been up to Haida Gwaii probably 5 times and never ever got to see the northern lights. So when I saw them, I started crying and was so excited. I forgot to wake up anyone because I just was like, they're gonna be gone when I get back. But yeah, that was awesome. And I think Christmas on board Class Afloat. For most of us, that was our first time away from our families for Christmas, so that was a really hard time for everyone. But also, we are our own little family now, and we had Secret Santa, we played games, everybody got the day off that day except for just being on watch. And yeah, that was one of the best days on board.
I think my most memorable moment on board was actually an interaction I had with a trainee. In my last year in the program, I stood as the intermediate watch officer, so I was in charge of all of the rig. But I had this kid in my watch that was having a really tough time. He was getting into fights with other kids in my watch. He was very argumentative. He just didn't want to listen. And so one night we were standing watch from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. And I just had him come back and drive. I sent my entire watch up forward, and I just had him come back and drive the boat with me and talk to me and like see what was going on. And so I was like, what's up? Like, you seem to be having a really tough time. Like, you know, like, do you want to talk about it? And he like opened up to me. He told me about his family situation and how he grew up in foster care and how it was really tough for him because he, you know, he had a lot of mixed feelings about being sent to this strange camp with these strange people. And so I kind of leveled with him. I was able to connect with him because we had similar family upbringing. So I told him a little bit about myself and, you know, how I grew up and how it was hard for me, like as a trainee coming on, you know, Playfair for the first time, but we were on Pathfinder. And by the end of the course, he was my favorite trainee. He was like a member of the team. Like he got along with the rest of our crew members and the rest of my watch. And I think that was really memorable for me to kind of just like connect with another kid. And he was like, oh, like, he's like, I didn't think that other people like were like me here. He'd never met another kid his age that had grew up in foster care besides people that he lived with. And so he just kind of was so surprised when I told him about like how I grew up. And so it was really cool for him and I to kind of connect with each other and like, just like, you know, learn from each other. And I think that's definitely my most memorable moment.
Yeah, it's hard to say what, you know, your number one best moment is. You know, if you sailed for many years, it's just like, you know, you have so many good moments. The one for me that isn't associated with any of the sail training programs or anything like that was just being on vacation in Cuba and going out on a very small sailboat with a couple other friends and just really enjoying ourselves. Like, you know, sailing most of my life in Canada and the US, you know, you never get that sort of tropical paradise vibe, you know, even in summer. So that was the first time sailing in really warm water where you could put your arm in and it's just beautiful. You know, beautiful blue ocean and just, yeah, just remember that one short little sail.
Perfect. So we are running a little bit short on time. So I guess we'll take a couple more questions. This is more for, I guess, for all the crew as well. If you have, after getting a couple of wages under your belt, what would you recommend to do to become a permanent crew member?
Keep track of the sea time. So most organizations will give you a logbook and they'll write down your voyage time. So keep track of that, but also keep track of how many hours that you are on helm and get your captain or officer or whoever is signing the logbooks to keep track of that as well, because that will help you when you get one of these, which is just like the Mariner's Sea book. And so that'll help you get like your mate's ticket, your officer's ticket, and help you work your way up. So that is super important. I did not keep any of mine from S.A.L.T.S, and I cannot find my logbook to save my life. And I've been on 13 S.A.L.T.S trips. So there's so much sea time that is in the garbage that I can't get back to help me get my ticket. So keep track of that.
A great way to become a permanent crew member, especially if you're someone that's going to be engaged with Briggs or St. Lawrence too, is to go back to their winter program. You learn a lot about how the boats are put together because they take them apart every winter and put them back together in the spring. So you learn a lot about ship construction and rigging and knots. And it's a really great way to get some in-depth knowledge about the boats themselves. And then additionally, like if you go through the winter program, you kind of have first dibs on crew positions for the next summer. And you can kind of work your way through the ranks that way. It's a volunteer position for a lot of organizations, but usually will offer either like a summer position when you get to be like a more senior member of the crew. But the best way to become a permanent crew member is to just make yourself available. Like if there are times where, you know, people are saying, hey, we need people to help with this maintenance thing in wintertime, make yourself available, go there, continually put yourself in that environment, because a big part of becoming crew members on tall ships is also connections. Like it's your sea time is a huge factor, but it's also like the people that you know, right? So if you build a relationship with captains and they know you to be a reliable person that they can trust to take charge and be a leader on board, then, you know, they're more likely to recommend a position for you.
Yeah, and I would say if you're looking to get a job on a boat, I would treat that job the same way people as their students. Like you're treating it like school as your job. You know, you have to do homework, you have to study, you have to read up on things. And the same can be said about seamanship. You know, you can always buy a book on seamanship. You can always do a study group with other sailors. You know, keep notes when you're on a boat. You know, the best way to remember the lines of the rigging or the sails is to write draw a diagram of the ship and try and quiz people on, hey, what is the sail? What's that boom? You know, that's the best way to be confident in knowing the ship.
I had a trainee that did that and kept a notebook with diagrams of all of the sails and all of the lines. I will never forget this girl because she just like whipped it out and was like, here, I've drawn this like very detailed diagram of the course yard. And you're like, when did you have time to do this? But it helped her in the end. It's very helpful.
I think also as a trainee, when you're on board, just always trying new things and putting yourself out there, letting the crew know that, hey, you want to learn, you want to try new things, and just always being ready to lend a helping hand. I think the best way to learn stuff is by doing it, by seeing others doing it, and by participating in it as well. Our next question is, should you bring a camera on board? Would you guys recommend that?
Yes.
Yes.
100% for that one. Have any of you guys ever been stopped by the Navy?
Yes.
The Coast Guard, but not why you think. As one of the past captains that worked on Playfair was working for the Coast Guard. And it wasn't me, it was the captain at the time, James, gave me a call and said, you know, we got stopped by the Coast Guard. And I said, why? And he said, oh, Reese Weed just wanted to say hi, but they proceeded to scare the living daylights of the captain because they knew that they knew another person. They came on, asked for all the papers, asked to see the ship's log and his captain's license and everything. And then at the end, they got off the boat and they said, yeah, Reese Weed says hi. And then they just drove away. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, we were not stopped, but boarded by the U.S. Coast Guard because we were entering New York Harbor as a Canadian vessel, which, you know, obviously that's a normal thing. It wasn't like we weren't expecting it. So it was just business as usual. They wanted to see our papers and everyone's passport and sent us on our way.
We didn't necessarily get stopped by them, but I believe it's Spanish Navy, they were doing shooting tests and we were going through their active shooting zones. So like, you have an hour to get out of the way. So we took all the sails down and went full speed the heck out of there.
Wow.
That was intense.
Those are some crazy stories. Especially Tasha. That's not fun. That's not nice. Like, why would they do that?
It was really funny. They were very lighthearted about it, but they came on board and had like serious face. But then the captain called me after, because when I was working for Toronto Brigantine, I was the designated person on shore. So if anything happened on the boat, I would get a call. So I got a call after and he said, yeah, so they came and scared the crap out of me, but it's fine. It was just Reese. And then I sent him an email after and say, hey, that's not cool. But it was still really funny.
Okay, so I think we should probably wrap up just to be conscious of people's time. I have a few things. First of all, thank you everyone for your great contributions. Thank you, Daniel, for running this session. It's been so great. I'm sure our people have learned so much about sailing from you guys and what it's really like to go on these programs. And even at the higher level of things, it's great to talk about advancement in this sector as well. So yeah, thank you guys so much. I'm not going to share my entire screen here. I'm going to share a window. So back to our little presentation here. We have a survey that we would appreciate if you guys filled out. You can go to shipsashores.ca/survey. It goes directly to our funder, the Canadian government, to tell them what an amazing job we're doing. So we would really appreciate it if you guys would complete this. And then number 2 is really, these are our contacts. So Ships to Shores, you can visit our website or our Instagram or we're on pretty much every social media nowadays. And then me, I'm Jai Chigani. I'm the Sailing Access Fund leader, and that's my email there. Mira is the one who is at the beginning as well. And Tasha is right there. She's our manager for Broad Reach. And all of our presenters, that's Liam as well, and then Daniel, and then Leticia. You can contact them just by contacting really info@shipsashores.ca. And I think we got one more thing. Thank you. So yeah, everyone from the Sailing Access Fund, thank you so much for coming. And everyone else, thank you so much for coming. We've got a session just like this, but different. It's Charting Basics next week on Saturday. For all of the Sailing Access Fund people and anyone who else wants to come. It's part of our boot camp sessions, which we have 3 of them. So there's this one, which is Tales from the Crew. Number 2, which is Charting Basics. And number 3, which is Ocean Plastics and Marine Sustainability. So we're really looking forward to getting as many people out there as possible. So definitely share the word. And yeah, if you haven't applied to our Sailing Access Fund yet, please do so. If you want to go sailing and don't have the means. Because we're really, the whole idea of the Sailing Access Fund is to provide funds to people who can't typically participate in these programs and increase representation and all these sorts of wonderful things. Mira, do you have anything else to add?
No, I don't. I was just going to say thank you so much to all our panelists. You guys were awesome. And thank you to everyone for joining. And I hope you have a good rest of your Saturday.
Yes, thanks so much.